I'm going to talk about SUSE and what we've been doing with HPC. One of the things that's kind of unusual about SUSE is that most people don't realize we actually have a very big HPC presence. We think that we're somewhere, I'll show you later, but we actually have a good portion of the paid Linux that's out there today. Some of that is direct and some of that is through partners, so I'll show you some of that. Okay. When we look at HPC customers today, well, just about any customer, they really have these problems. Number one, complexity. As customers move up into starting to do HPC as a business point of view, there's a lot of very confusing software. So we're trying to make that easier. Along the way, people, once they get their cluster set up, they really need to worry about, well, how do I, what do I do if there's another meltdown or Spectre or something like that? I have to have some kind of level of support there. And then kind of the final one is really a very important one is, if I'm getting into high performance computing as a business, which we see quite a bit now, is how do I get up as quickly and easily as possible? And so these are really kind of the areas that we've been tailoring SUSE Linux for HPC to really address. And I'll show you a lot of stuff that we've been doing over the last year. Now, the 5 things that you need to know about us. Number one, strong partnerships. We have lots of partners around here. I'll talk to you about those. We have a lot of differentiators in our actual offerings. So in some people's HPC offerings are really just the same offering, cheaper. We're not that. We're actually doing stuff specifically to enable HPC. AI and ML, of course, is a really, really big part of high-performance computing environments today. So we've got some news in that area. There's more news I can't share yet. And one of the things that we did last year is we really looked at what we were selling our customers, what we were providing. And I made a number of changes to that. And some of those changes are financial, as in reducing cost and reducing price. The other is providing additional options. So things like giving you a longer life cycle. If you deploy a cluster, it'll allow you to stay up on it for a longer period of time. And then I'll talk a little bit about market share and just kind of talk about why we're the hidden distro. A lot of people don't know that we're actually in HPC, at least certainly not to the effect that we are. So let's talk about our partnerships. So very briefly, we have a lot of partners here today. HPE, Cray, Lenovo are kind of the major hardware partners that we're working with. You'll also see, of course, Intel as a technology provider for those guys, but also ARM. And in fact, one of the things that we did over the last several years is really do a lot of work to enable ARM as a new platform for SUSE. And when I say it's enabled as a new platform, our ARM enablement is exactly the same as we have on every other platform. So we use the same source trees. So if you want to run SUSE Linux on a mainframe or a power system or a Raspberry Pi, it's all the same source. Okay, we don't have different versions and different things for different platforms. You see some of the others. NVIDIA is one area that we've been working quite a bit with most recently. And then there are a number of other providers like Bright, Altair, and Univa who really are providing a more structured management environment around HPC that is particularly interesting to customers that are running business. Now, I want to point out kind of one of the interesting things that's up and coming. I mentioned that we did a lot of work around ARM. So we have this project it's called the Catalyst UK project. This is a partnership between SUSE, HPE, and ARM, and it's basically to set up 3 clusters in the UK, so at the University of Bristol, Leicester, and Edinburgh, and they're each going to get 64-node HPC cluster based on the Marvell, formerly Cavium ThunderX2, running on the Apollo 70. So those are starting to be delivered today. In fact, the Edinburgh one should have been delivered this week. The others will be following in the next few days. I don't know if you've looked around at the different ARM processors, or different kind of in the industry, but the Marvell ThunderX2 really is the one that's really, really tuned for high-performance computing, and you see a number of vendors of that. In fact, my next one here is Cray. So this is the Isambard project. This is Cray's answer, or Cray running on it's the XC50, and it is running also the Marvell ThunderX2 processors. Now they have a different interconnect. They have the Aries interconnect, is one of Cray's highlights, and they're actually running CLE, Cray Linux environment, which is actually based on SUSE Linux. So we have an agreement with Cray, and they take our SUSE Linux and they do some things to it, make it fit into their environment, and that's where we have quite a bit of things. Now, you'll notice what's kind of interesting here, if you look at the differences in performance for ThunderX2 compared to Skylake or Broadwell, the areas that ThunderX2 really kind of really trashes the competition is in memory bandwidth. So you go talk to the Marvell folks, they'll tell you a lot more details about it, but they have a lot of memory bandwidth. They also have 32 cores per socket, so they have lots and lots of cores, lots and lots of threads. They do SMT2, so they have up to 2 threads per each core, and like I said, they got 32 cores per socket, 2-socket box, 64 cores. So a lot of threads, a lot of memory bandwidth, and that's why both Cray and HPE are building systems based on that ThunderX2. Now, obviously, most people, though, are running Intel processors. And so this is a win that we had earlier this year. You might have seen the discussion at the Intel. So the LRZ system is a petascale system that SUSE is providing the software for. This one is kind of an interesting one. Initially, this was going to go to Free Linux. They were going to go to CentOS. And then when they found out some of the features that SUSE has, they said, no, we'd rather go with SUSE instead. We'd rather pay SUSE for subscriptions than just use free CentOS. It's a bad place to stand, sorry. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of those features in a moment. Okay, let's talk about the differentiators. So if you look at what we offer, there are really several kind of layers of this. So the first layer is the operating system itself. So SUSE Linux Enterprise for HPC, we've been in that business for a long time, but to be honest, for a long time it was really just cheaper Linux. I mean, we just cut the price down a lot. What changed towards the end of 2016, the beginning of 2017, is this thing that we call the HPC module. Now, the reason it's called the HPC module is that if we put something just directly into SUSE Linux, we can only update it like every time we do a service pack once a year. By using the module structure, it's still part of SUSE Linux, but we can update it much more often. And we did a couple of updates last year. We've done one so far this year, and I'll show you more about this. But these are basically HPC-specific packages that we make available as part of our normal distribution. And you'll see a list of those in a moment. The next one is Package Hub. Sometimes we have some software that we're not going to be able to support. Either it's too immature, we don't have enough market share for or market demand for it. And so what Package Hub allows you to do is to access community-sponsored or community-supported software that we curate. So we build it into our environment, we package it, and you can install it directly into your system just as if it were any other SUSE software, but it is community supported, it's not directly supported by SUSE. I'll bring up OpenSUSE Leap. So a lot of you are probably familiar with CentOS and RHEL, where CentOS is effectively the kind of the community supported version of RHEL. Well, we have that same relationship with OpenSUSE Leap. We've done some work to make it look a little bit closer, a lot closer, but OpenSUSE Leap is freely available. It is community supported, you can download it. And one of the big changes that we made for our most recent release, SLES 15, is that you can take an OpenSUSE Leap environment and migrate it up to SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. So you can actually upgrade to a supported Linux without having to reinstall everything. We've got some normal things like developer subscriptions, not as exciting perhaps for x86, but we do have developer subscriptions available for ARM. And there's some other options. If you're an academic institution, we actually have some even better options for you to get SUSE Linux Enterprise into your environment at a really minimal cost. Enablement for Azure and AWS. You probably heard some of the people are talking about using these cloud providers for offload, cloud bursting they call it in many cases. So we have customers that are using both of those. They basically have their SUSE Linux environment that they're running on site. Maybe they have 100 nodes or so, and they're able to use when they need additional capacity, they can go up to Azure or AWS. And we have SUSE Linux images up there that customers can use directly. Now, on those images, you can either bring your own subscription or you can get the subscription through the cloud service. So once again, another option for our customers. And I'll talk about some of these others in a moment. So let's talk about the restructure I did earlier, towards the end of last year. One of the things that when we sell you SUSE Linux for HPC, we don't distinguish between head nodes or compute nodes or development nodes or any of that stuff. We have one price for all. So if you have 2,000, cluster nodes, we charge you the same price for all of it. It makes it easier. You can change the structure. Maybe you need more head nodes or more other nodes. You can get in there pretty easily. One of the other big changes I made was reducing the prices. So SUSE Linux, prior to this, was very inexpensive, but when I looked at it in the larger clusters particularly, it started to add up. So I actually dropped the list price for SUSE Linux Enterprise for a standard subscription by 44%, and for a priority subscription, about 55%. So I made a pretty significant drop there in the prices. And that, once again, it's just to make us more competitive. We understand that Free Linux is one of our competitors, so I can't beat free, but I can get a lot closer to it. We do, of course, support x86 and ARM clusters. So I mentioned earlier we've been investing in ARM for a long time. We've done 3 releases of SUSE Linux now for ARM. So for us, it's just another platform. We support those two environments, and we do everything that we provide as part of SUSE Linux for HPC is provided for both of those. I'll talk about a couple of options to give you a little bit longer service life, SPOS and LTSS. One of the other things that we did is, as customers started deploying more business type environments, maybe they didn't need 100 servers. Maybe they only needed 10 or 20 or 30. So we actually made it possible for people to purchase clusters of a very small size, all the way down to 4 nodes. So if you want to get started and build up, you can certainly do that. Finally, one of the last things that we did as part of this restructure, we came out with a new version of SUSE Linux earlier this year that's called SLES 15. And we went from 12 to 15 because we have executives and they didn't like 13 or 14. So we went straight to 15. But one of the things we did is we took our HPC and split it off as a separate product. So it still has the same common code base as regular SLES, but what it gives us is more flexibility to do things like installation tuning and how you actually lay it down, and in the future perhaps additional acceleration that's kind of specific to an HPC environment. So we did quite a bit of changes. All of that happened really last year and then became available earlier this year. And it took a little bit longer for some of our partners like HPE and Lenovo and those guys. It takes them a little longer to get things there, but that's all history now. That's all out there. Let's talk about the HPC module. So this is something that we decided to do a couple of years ago. Let's take some common HPC packages and make them available as part of our supported offerings. So once again, these are available for x86 and ARM-based systems. You can see some of the things here: Slurm, HDF, ScalaPack, OpenBlast, Ganglia. There's quite a few things there that we are providing that are kind of HPC flavored, that are, and some of them are completely HPC, that are supported as part of our standard subscription. So not only did I lower the prices, but I gave you more software that's actually supported as part of this. And this is very important. You know, a lot of people, particularly organizations that don't have a lot of post-grad students to maintain things, you know, they need to maintain this stuff. And I was talking, in fact, to one of our government customers, and I said, well, you don't need this stuff. You have all these guys sitting around, you know, that are basically working as free labor. And the guy said, just because I can do it doesn't mean I want to do it. Okay, so it's another way for us to make things much more focused on HPC. Like I said, the real thing here is over the past couple of years, we've gone from having a cheaper offering to something that's becoming more and more tailored to the HPC market. I'm not going to let you, you're not have to go through. This is just an example of some of the packages. You know, I mentioned Slurm, but you can see a lot of others in here. And you'll notice that some of these, you know, over the life, they continue to get updated. So Slurm in particular, we had to put some patches on for service upgrades or security issues. But we have a fairly broad list of things there, something that we continue to expand. Now these are things, as I said before, that are all supported. So everything on this list, we support break-fix support just like it was any other component within SUSE. So you don't have to go anywhere else if you want you know, the normal kind of support. Now if you want consulting or something like that, you know, then you're going to have to go to somebody else, like in particular SCAD-MD for Slurm, do an excellent job there. But we're trying to provide a base level. They're tuned to some extent. So in particular, in the ARM space, we know that there was a lot of tuning that the Marvell folks did specifically around the ARM platform. So those are inherited in the support we're doing. I do have a goal over time to be able to actually do tuning for specific processors. I don't have that yet, but we are getting a pretty good pass there. All right, let's talk about the unsupported stuff. I mentioned this. This is Package Hub. It's a way for people to get access to things very, very easily. They can just install it with the same zipper command they would anywhere else. Specifically around HPC, there's a number of things. Cluster Shell was one that we had some demand for, but not quite enough. Same with Robinhood. Singularity was, to be honest, just a little bit too fluid. So we have 2.6 out there, or 2.6.1 out there now. We're looking to move that up to 3.01 probably. 3.0 had some issues. But it's a way for us to provide this very easily. It's still community supported, okay, so it's not officially supported by us yet, but it's a direction that we're going in. And in fact, in the case of Singularity, once it settles down a bit, I do want to have that as a supported container offering with us. We just got TensorFlow up there just today, I was told by my team. It's over on the other side that we have TensorFlow out there, and Cafe is also in the works and will be out there. So once again, these are community-supported packages, really easy for you to install and use, and they have been curated by SUSE. All right, let's talk about AI and ML. We're seeing machine learning and AI across the board, so that should be no surprise to any of you. We've got a couple of things going on there, but I want to point out one thing that we did just this week is that we announced that we're now a member of OpenACC. So if you went to the NVIDIA presentation, you saw how they're really trying to provide a common way to access accelerators across different platforms or different kinds of accelerators. So we joined this community, and we're now a participant in that. So that's another way we're supporting that. Okay, let's talk about the last thing here. Oh, oops, I had that in there twice. Sorry about that. So one of the other things we did was added additional lifecycle support. So a lot of times when people build an HPC cluster, they don't really want to screw with it, right? They want to leave it on the same level as long as they can. And so generally in SUSE, each one of our service packs has about an 18-month life. So for example, Service Pack 3 came out last year in late third quarter, early fourth quarter. It'll go out there till, it'll be supported all the way out into March of 2019. Meanwhile, Service Pack 4 is going to happen around the end of the year, and typically we have about a 6-month overlap where you can continue to call in, get new fixes and all that stuff on the older Service Pack. What we added with this SPOS is a full additional year of support. Now you might say, okay, that's pretty nice, because if you're on this release, you'll notice I can get all the way out to here. I'm now overlapping the subsequent Service Pack. Now, the difference between getting just the 18-month support and getting 18 months plus a full year, it's only 20% more. So it's a fairly nominal price to get a much longer support life cycle. And we've seen a lot of customers, particularly in the fallout from Spectre and Meltdown, who might have let their subscriptions lapse, and they said, gee, maybe I do need to have some ability. Now we also have another offering called long-term support pack subscription. If you need even more space, you can continue to buy years 2 and 3 out of that, so that you can buy additional couple of years there. I will tell you this is more expensive, but the SPOS is definitely a bargain at only 20% more. So this is a new option. We didn't have this before. We just used to sell the one thing and that's it. This is an area I'll tell you, as I get more feedback from my customers, I'll try to expand this, maybe give us an SPOS 2 that gets us another year there, so we're working on this. One of the things you should understand is that our HPC offerings are not static. We are actively working, developing them, moving them forward. There are a number of other products in the HPC space or related to the HPC space. First one is SUSE Enterprise Storage. This is our Ceph-based storage product. We've got some kind of unique things. We have an OpenATIC front end, so it's very, very easy to administer. One of the key things that's kind of interesting about Ceph, or about our Ceph offering, our SUSE Enterprise Storage, is that we do not charge you for storage. We only charge you for servers. So for like $10,000, you get a setup of, I think, 5 servers or 6 servers initially, and you can put 10 disks on those or 100 disks. We don't care. And as you add capacity, you just buy more servers to add onto it. So we do not charge you for the gigabyte or the petabyte or anything like that. You simply have to pay for more equipment to keep the cluster up. And now, Ceph is not really kind of suitable for mainline storage for HPC environments, but we do have customers using it for archiving their older data, and I'll show you an example of that next. SUSE Manager, this is more for business type folks, so it gives you the ability to deploy and manage and update and things like that. Probably most kind of hardcore HPC guys are going to use Werewolf and stuff that's native to HPC. But if you're a business and you don't have expertise in that area, we can provide SUSE Manager. And then the final offering there is SUSE OpenStack Cloud. We've had a really long support lifecycle for OpenStack Cloud. I think going back to the E release was our first one. We were the first guys to commercially support OpenStack, and now we have a pretty broad range of support in OpenStack. I want to talk very briefly about Ceph, or our SUSE Enterprise Storage. So this is an example where we're using with a customer, where basically they're using the Ceph-based storage as a way to archive the older data out of their HPC complex. You know, storage is so cheap now, you know, it's like, rather than having to deal with disk or anything like that, or tape rather, this gives you kind of a near online type storage that you can use with your HPC environment. And we do have customers using this today. One last point here around making stuff available for you. We do have a new renewed academic program. So this is a program that's designed to do a couple of things. One of the things it's designed to do is to get more people that are familiar with Linux, you know, out of the university, so that they can grow up and become useful as administrators and working with Linux environment. So we provide training materials that can be used to actually develop or use as curriculum in academic environments. We do provide fairly significant discounts for SUSE Linux itself, so if you want to use that in your education, but also for administration, we can provide that to you. So once again, it's a way to get a extremely discounted price, and you can stack these things up. So if you're a college or administration, you can actually stack the very inexpensive SUSE HPC on top of this administrative and get a really, really low cost. And with this kind of environment, you're talking about a cost that is, you know, let's say 1/5 or less of what we would charge for a normal SUSE Linux. So it's a really attractive way for you to get it into your environment, and of course giving you access to our tools that you can build your own curriculum around, so you can kind of ramp up and get the next generation of Linux folks out there. And of course all of this comes with our access to our normal support. Okay, the last thing I really want to talk about was paid OS support. So I mentioned that SUSE, many people don't realize that SUSE has such a big presence in HPC. And if you look at the top 500, you go through the list, and a lot of times it says Linux, or it doesn't even say the OS. So one of my colleagues went through and looked at each different account in the top 500, figured out which ones were using free Linux, which ones were using paid Linux, and then, you know, which releases. If we look at paid Linux in the top 500, we figure that we're in about 50% of the top 100, and overall, you know, we're about 60% of all paid Linux in the HPC environment. Now, a lot of that comes from Cray Linux environment, which is basically SUSE Linux underneath the covers, but we also have around about a 14-15% market share just with SUSE branded Linux. And that's quite a bit more than we see in other environments. So as 15% of overall top 500, not just the paid. So we have a pretty good leadership position there. You know, it's one of my jobs is to make sure that people know about this, because people think, well, I never heard of you. Well, we're there. You just may not have identified it. So, you know, what I should have given you here in this minute is a few minutes, is that we do have a pretty broad range of Linux operating system offerings around HPC. It's something that we're building and investing in. So everything you saw here today is, you know, where we are now. We're continuing to move forward with that. We try to price it very attractively and very simply. The HPC module for a lot of customers is an excellent way to get access to some of these libraries without you having to do the work there. We've got the service life options, and once again, I just, you know, underscore this. We do this for x86 and ARM. ARM is just another platform for us. We've done 3 releases of SUSE Linux Enterprise now. It's old stuff. We're not using a different glibc or different kernel or any of that stuff. We're all running the same. And then we also have Package Hub along with that. So that was pretty quick. Going through a lot of slides, so thank you very much for your patience. And I'll turn it over to Russ.
All right, Jay, let's give it up for Jay.
Thank you.
All right.